Okay, that's fantastic. Got it. Stay participant. Join audio.
Good. All right. That's a bit easier. Because that way I can talk with my microphone and it's just a little bit easier. Admit. Coolio. Okay.
All right. Now we're rocking and rolling.
Now we're rocking and rolling. We figured it out as much as we can. Okay. So I suppose, considering I prompted this conversation, just do a brief, I don't know, introduction into why I wanted to talk to you. I've been circling around sort of this estuary for 5-6 years. I started onto the Peterson rabbit hole around 2017 and then sort of found myself in the Paul and Pajot kind of spheres. One of the interesting things that Peterson did for me was actually like made me question what language does and how language sort of creates realities and what you try to do within that process. And I was a poet and still have been trying to sort of just navigate how that sort of trade is in culture, like how people use poetry and stuff like that. And in the spheres in my culture, the poetry has been very much overtaken by identity politics and things like that. And so learning how to sort of actually unthink a lot of that type of stuff was really interesting. But also, again, it's one of those things where it's just like, you can criticize a viewpoint to the end of the day, but it's like much harder to build something and much harder to actually try to understand something in a constructive way. And I see what you guys have been doing in sort of the randos and the bridges as something that's very, very close to, I don't know, at least an attempt to try to build something in poetry. And I watched you in, who did you do the Words of Language is Magic?
That was with Michael
Lighty. That was absolutely amazing. It was a really cool thing to sort of follow on with, sort of like how you guys like sort of perceive words and language in your own way. But I also thought it would be a good time to actually like share a bit of our poetry as well.
Yeah.
It's nice.
You know what I find fascinating about that conversation that Michael and I had was that under the surface of that conversation was a longer conversation that we'd been having about he was saying that, you know, language is, how did he put that now? Like, for me, language is an obstacle, and ultimately we won't need language, right? Language is like a primitive way of expressing yourself. And the reason I say that, the reason I say that is because I find it hard to articulate myself most of the time because I have a lot of things going on, right?
Yeah.
But so I say that, but at the same time, I write poetry, I write songs, right? And I feel like, that's the truest form of expression for me, myself, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when I'm having, like, when I'm propositionally trying to lay something, I'm no good at that. I'm really no good. You know, like I can hardly even do it about language, right? But
Yeah.
but I use language, and a lot of people have said to me, you know, a lot of people have admired the way that I use language, which I found really, really interesting, because I feel like I'm in this perpetual back and forth of loving and hating it at the same time. I don't know about you.
I don't know. I entered into poetry through hip hop more than the classics. Like, I had an appreciation of the classics somehow when I was 15, which I still kind of don't actually get. But it was the sort of staccato rhythms that hip hop used to have, like where there would be alliterations and rhythmic like bouncings, and a lot of what I think poetry actually does to someone is compel them to oration, which is something that you don't do with a book unless there's a very poetic phrase, when you actually go like, oh, I need to speak it, and you actually like you want to almost embody it, and that was like one thing that helped me carry on. And it's almost like the powers of magic, the powers of language, the musicality and the imagery, and sort of all of these different points of it were little sort of avenues that I could force my feelings through so that they could get progress. Like I would be like, if I was trying to like you were saying, if I was trying to propositionally like lay something out, I could get stuck on an idea. But if I stopped just thinking about the proposition and started actually thinking about the imagery, I could take the imagery and carry on through. And if the image was getting confusing, then I could twist it into another way. And like the rhythm and the music and all of that type of stuff, that allowed you to sort of converge like all of these ideas together. The thing that poetry did a lot, especially to the very complicated ideas that I had, sometimes I would write and not know where I was starting, let alone where I'd finish. But a lot of times I would know where I was starting and I didn't know where to go next. And that was the reason I wrote. And it was like, I think poetry has the ability to let you arrive at an idea as opposed to just hear it. Like, I think that's like a problem with like conversations. Like, I think it was within maybe Viveki and Rafe, or maybe Viveki and Peterson, I can't remember, but you have to communicate something to someone. You have to tell it in so many different ways, purely because you can't tell it in your way because they don't have your frame, and you don't know their frame, so you have to give them the opportunity. I don't know, like, do you think that there is like, how do you feel like poetry sort of like helps you like explain an idea or like feel through an idea? Would you want to share one as well?
Share a poem? Yeah, sure. Well, what I often find with poetry is that like I'll just get a sense that I need to write about something, and I don't get a concept or, like an outline of what I want to write. It's usually a couple of lines or an image, and then I just need to write it out. And I find that when I'm done, I often I discover something about myself in the end, right? And so, you know, like John Vervaeke talks about dialogos with another person, right? Having a dialogos, a dialogue, but in a transformative way. And I think, like, we had a conversation, Nate and I'm trying to remember her name now, his ex-wife and myself, on poetry, and we called it a conversation with being, because that's what it feels like when I write poetry. It feels like I'm having a dialogos with something deeper than myself, but it's myself. And I ran across this concept in Judaism, where on the Sabbath, when they're meditating and praying and, you know, just resting, that they encounter their additional soul, which I thought was really interesting, right? Because I thought, well, I know that feeling. Like,
Wow.
I kind of understand that, because I've encountered that when I write a poem. Right? Yeah. So I'll look for a poem here that.
Yeah. I'll quickly like tap onto the dialogue point of it.
Okay.
I'm not sure if this has ever happened to you, but I've completed poems with poems that I wrote previously. And I think that is one of the creepiest things like I've ever experienced. Every now and then I'll write a poem and I'm like, I don't know how to end it. I don't know how to end it. And I'll just flick through a bunch of like different like sort of odds and ends that I've written before. And I'd be like, holy crap, that fits perfectly. And I'm like, I'll put it, yeah, like
I've never
Making of a Sacred Object. I won't put it on because I have it online. I'll put a link in the description of this video. But the end of that poem was its own poem to begin with.
Okay.
But I was just like, oh, this is the description of this larger piece, or this is that dialogue. I think it's always interesting, yeah, to say it is really a dialogue, because it's questions and answers, and
It is.
yeah, it's strange because like I always wish a poem could be a narrative, but it's not quite.
Yeah. If it is, then it's like thumbs down.
Yeah, it's like, no, you can't. You're not allowed to know where you are in a poem.
Yeah.
In a narrative, you have to know you're at the beginning, you're at the middle, or near the end. Is like with a poem, it's just like, no, you have to be lost in it. Anyway, have you found one?
I wrote this one recently. It's not a long. I don't write really long poems. So, in the morning I rise, seeking your face. I rise. I look to the hills. I rise. In the valley of death, I rise. I see the heavens. I rise. I touch the stars. I rise. And, you know, like when I wrote that, I was thinking about getting out of bed. That's what I was thinking about. In the morning, I rise. And then I was like, yeah, I rise, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm constantly transcending.
Yeah. It's
you know?
It actually reminds me of the conversation I had with Luke about the prayer of St. Patrick. It's like Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ to my left, Christ to my right, Christ when I rise. And it's just like, you rise. You actually do have that you have those transcendent moments every day.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. I have one actually that I did that also has a simple explanation, but it doesn't have a simple. It's not simple. It's a little bit longer. I unfortunately write. I don't have any that are terribly long here, but I normally like I've written more than 7 10-minute long poems before.
I know. Is that one you mentioned, the making of a sacred object? Is that the one that I heard?
Yeah, with the music as well.
Well, let me just say this for anybody listening. You have to click on that link and you have to listen to that poem, because it's It's crazy.
Oh, you want to think about a freaky dialogue. That was me writing a poem to the music. Like I
Yeah.
was just trying to figure what the words were that fit the emotions that were coming out of that piece, and I was just like, this is incredible. Anyway, this is actually this is called Traces, and it's the only poem I've ever had that's been published. At night, the ocean feels so close. Clouds black enough to eat horizon. Wind so hollow, like falling. And the night takes my breath one last time. The nights are hot and loud and empty, without any force or want. Infinity so large it pushes ankles first to fill the crevice. The past and future are only words in the night. A life is just ink in water, baptizing an origin that makes no difference, tendrilled and terrifying, a last breath, and so quiet it stains the wind and water, so black the night barely sees it. The past and the future are only words, like breath and the wind, like us and the black waves. And the night takes my breath one last time. The water is warm and the salt warns of the dangers of the sacred, losing the edge of our senses, losing the fear and ecstasy, unraveled in the night, only to be watched silently, not seen, exposed, like an open wound in water, to feel the cut and to heal. The danger of the sacred is that there is no longer you in the world, and there is no longer now and then. The past and the future are only words, scrambling to hold on to something. It's all too messy. Was there ever a point where it came out like blood from an open wound? Regrets and dreams leap out like sea foam eating into themselves just to be seen. And the sound of the wind pushes it all into the horizon, and the horizon becomes larger. The horizon slides closer, and the clouds and the sand and the sacreds thunder out a perfect song, falling in the flight, pulling down the sky in high tide, and a secret as profound as the night breaks forth like the stars when the storm is behind. And the night takes my breath one last time.
Whoa, that's amazing.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that's one of the very few poems I had where I was just trying to return to this. It's not a vision because I was actually there, but there was I went for a drive by myself to one of the beaches here in the middle of the night. It was very warm and completely black, and I was just walking into the water. Wow. And the water was not cold enough to really feel the difference between the air and the water, and you could just hear a thunderstorm in the very far distance, and just with complete blackness you just feel this sensation rise up your body, and it's just what is that, and what is that experience? It's but yeah, it's an incredible one. I really do like that one.
It's very nice. It's not nice, it's really good. Is it printed somewhere? Because if you have a link to that, I'd like to read it.
Yeah.
Too. Maybe you can put that in.
Maybe I'll have to record that one. Yeah. That's the only one I've ever had published in an art journal, actually. It's my only ever piece of published poetry. But yeah, it's I'll put it up as Trace. It's called Traces. I can even pop this text on here. It's something that yeah, it's a very interesting one because I always felt like that one was better read. Yeah, it's but I really do like that one. With when do you feel like a pattern is something that you want to link to? When you had your poem about I Rise, is that is that the frame of your idea, when it's you meet something, you rise, you meet something, you rise, and it's just I honestly don't know.
Like I have just been writing ever since I was a very small child, ever since I could write. And I made sure I could write really early, because my teacher said whoever can write first gets to go to the library. And so I made sure that I wrote a story before everyone else in my class, because I desperately wanted to go to the library and get a book. And she took me to the library. I was in grade 1. She took me to the library and said I could pick any book I wanted. And I was the only person in it. It was a really small school. Like it was built in the 1800s. So it was like a little schoolhouse, and the library was like in a closet. It was just a small, like a maintenance room or something. And I went in there, and I was just like enthralled. I loved the smell of books. I loved being in that room. I loved seeing all the backings. And, it was just, I realized that I was somewhere where I belonged, And this is why I have to laugh when I fight about language, because I was in a room full of words, and I felt like this is where where I belong. But anyway, so the book I chose was 101 Poems by Robert Frost. Yeah. And I took it home, and I remember, struggling to read it, but I did. I read some of the poems, and that was the beginning of my love of poetry. And so after that, I used to sing a lot as a little kid, and I would sing to things, and I would make up my own songs, right? So I would sing to trees, or I would sing to my cat, or I would sing to whatever. And then I started writing them down. And I just, I never thought really much about what I was doing. I didn't even complete high school. Okay. And I could have, like, it wasn't like I dropped out. And I never went to college, just kind of started my life.
Just one sec.
Yeah.
There was a robot vacuum underneath my feet I had to get rid of. But anyway, yeah, so you left school.
Yeah, and I just my life has just kind of just always like been an adventure, and so I just wrote all the way through, and I would say about 5 or 6 years ago, I started to actually write more deliberately, where I would force myself to just think of something and write it out, and I always thought that I would be less creative in doing something like that, but I was more creative, especially the more parameters, like the more constraint that I gave myself, the better it was. And I loved it. Right. And so I would say that, I wrote a few good poems in my lifetime, nothing that I would, write home about, but my poetry has been getting better. It's been getting better in the last 5 or 6 years, which is really kind of interesting, because I never thought much about it, actually, to be honest with you. So, yeah. So, I'm not one of those people who's studied poetry, who's familiar with all the literature. I actually haven't even read much poetry. I got that book out in grade 1, and I've always had a copy of that book all my life, because that was sacred to me, that book, right? 101 Poems by Robert Frost. And I've read poetry, but I never made I wasn't the kind of person who could just sit in a big comfy chair and read, Shelley or,
I think it's like an insult to a poetry book to read it cover to cover. It's like, it's like, no, you just meant to open a random page, pick that one, and then read like another 5 pages in, and like, it's not meant to be structured in a way that sort of makes them all make sense. They're meant to just leap out at you.
Yeah, I really relate to Emily Dickinson, actually. Emily Dickinson is kind of like, writing on napkins, writing four lines that just like blow your mind, not long. And she's capturing these moments, that she sees. She sees something in the moment and she captures it kind of like a butterfly, and she was very introverted, and I'm not as introverted as Emily Dickinson. Like, she was like a recluse, she had a few friends, good ones, like other poets even, but I am introverted, and I'm very observant, and I see a lot of things, and when I see them, I don't just see what I'm looking at. You know what I'm saying? I see something below the surface, and sometimes it compels me to write about it. That's how I would express my experience.
Yeah, I feel like there's something very true when like you hear about re-enchantment and stuff like that. Like I see it in that sense of, oh yes, things are imbued with meaning and stuff like that. But like I like there's the etymological link between enchant and the French enchanté. It's like to meet you, to actually meet the real thing.
I like
there's
that.
a koan. I think I talked about it with Luke. I can't remember, but I said but it goes like, before I was on my way to enlightenment, I saw the mountains as just mountains and the trees as just trees. As I became on my way to enlightenment, I saw that the mountains were not merely mountains and the trees were not merely trees. And now that I'm enlightened, I see the mountains are mountains and the trees are trees. And I love that, like that return to knowledge and that return to sort of a truer understanding. But you have to meet the world in that middle space as well, where things are not just what they are also, characters and people and sort of sensations and moods and in relationship to the world around them as well. Like exactly. I think a lot of people, like the interesting thing about enchantment is like people are understanding the relationship a lot more again.
Have you ever read any of George MacDonald?
Only what you've put up.
Okay. He wrote a book called Fantastes, and C.S. Lewis says that that's the book that baptized his imagination. Okay. And it's not very long, and if you really need to listen to Audible has a good version of it. But there's a story in there of, this guy's on a journey, and he, at some point in his journey, he goes somewhere, and when he leaves that place, he suddenly has a shadow. He didn't have a shadow before, but now he has a shadow, right? And sometimes his shadow does things on its own, like it'll move in front of him, and and it'll poke fun at him, and in this one scene, he and I just love it because he meets this little fairy. He's in a fairyland, and he meets this fairy who's, when he describes the hat that he's wearing, and he's holding these magical things in his hands. He describes what those magical things do, and so on and so forth, right? And then the shadow passes over and lands on that little fairy, and it's just a little boy with a couple of broken toys and a straw hat. And I'm like, yes, that's right. We can let that shadow fall on the world and just see it, the way it appears to us. Or we can, like I said earlier, we can look for that thing below the surface and see the magic, right? And when you see the magic, it enchants it immediately. It's only when your own shadow falls on the thing, that you no longer have that enchanted perspective.
Yeah, no, that's really, really beautiful.
Yeah.
I think that's like also why it's hard to read other people's poetry, or try to get that from other people's poetry, because when you actually try to, I don't know, yeah, you're trying to look at the world like over your shadow. You're still trying to read someone else's interpretation of something. I mean, yeah, like we'll find great poets and authors like Emily Dickinson and George MacDonald. And you know, they'd be great at what they actually end up doing and stuff like that. But yeah, it's very hard to read another author that can give you what you see when you write something, like that actual process of like unveiling the world when you are writing it.
I would say it depends on who it is. Like when I read Emily Dickinson, I'm like, I could almost walk away and start writing in her voice. Like that's how embodied I feel by her when I read Emily Dickinson. Like I actually had to stop myself. I was going to write a poem, and then I thought, no, this sounds like Emily Dickinson. This is awful. I can't do that. I'm channeling Emily. And Rilke, I can read Rilke, and it blows me away, like every time. George MacDonald he writes poetry, but his poetry sucks. Like even C.S. Lewis said it did. And I had to agree with him, even though like George is like a saint to me. So, but his fairy tales are just like,
yeah,
second to none.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Like I find like Tolkien has a lot of ideas in his poetry that are incredible. Like even the ones in Elvish and stuff like that, when you kind of like, you have to learn it in the second language first to understand how it actually feels. Yep.
Okay.
Yes, very good. Yeah, so there are a couple of authors that have that kind of effect. One of them is a hip hop musician called Aesop's Rock, like Aesop's Fables. His like, he was documented as one of the most verbose rappers of like the current of the total genre.
Yeah,
like he just uses so many words and images that just like you get like blown away with every single line.
Yeah.
Whereas you, I think.
Hello.
Yeah. But yeah, there's like.
I never appreciated rap music. When it started, I remember when it started because I'm old enough.
Yes, you would.
and I was like, oh, this is good. This is good. To me, it was a spoken word thing. That's what it was. Like it was poetry, right? And but then it just devolved into this, like, commercialized. But recently I've been listening to some better rappers, and I mean, I can't say I like the music really, but I can appreciate what they're doing, and I do stand in awe of the ability to do what they do. Like it's and it is kind of a flow state, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it is some incredible images that catch you into it, and the percussion of it is like almost this moment that helps you get lost again. The one that I remember the most was there's a hip hop album that had a poem in it, and that's the one that sort of like rattled me into writing again. And the line was, "I can think of nothing heavier than an aeroplane, no greater conglomerate of metal and steel. I can think of nothing less likely to fly. There are no wings more weighted." And I was just like,
Whoa.
just seizing up at it. And I was just like, that's like,
I get that. You know, I have a favorite artist. He's a Canadian. He's considered folk, but he does all kinds of music, really. And I mostly fell in love with him for his writing. You know, I can't quote anything offhand, and I don't have a lyrics book here. Joni Mitchell also does that to me. Joni Mitchell is like, what? And it's not just the words. She, you know, she's a painter, really. Like, that's her first love. And so I often imagine that that's what she's doing with the music and the words. She's painting, you know, and she's mixing the color, right, of the words and the music. And she's creating all these. Yeah, it's crazy. She's so good.
like, do you think that, like, the thing that I find interesting to think about now is what poetry is actually meant to be in a role for, like, in culture, like in wider culture, because a lot of what I see happen is poets either get lumped in with very niche literati academia, or they're musicians, like they're pop icons, like Leonard Cohen, or would be like, I don't know, one of the most famous poets right now, like of the last like 20-30 years. And I mean, there's a couple young poets that are known for a very particular style, but poetry isn't music. It's not something that, like, is simply just to entertain or sort of like give someone that ecstatic moment to be part of something larger. It's a meeting place in some places. Like, I talked about it to my friend, and like you kind of alluded to it when you talk about that dialogos. There's like, you normally, like, there used to be like an idea of like you're having a dialogue with, like, you're talking to someone. Like when you're writing for someone's going to read it, even if it is just you. Like, there is an audience, and so it turns into a dialogue in that sense. But I actually think that there is that. What did you call it? Your second voice, or
your additional soul?
Your additional soul. And Peterson actually talked about this as well, which is very strange. But there is actually, like, the middle ground, the medium itself has a voice. And like the medium itself has a culture, and like Thomas Eliot actually said, like, you are like talked about this, saying like you're the summation of this whole tradition. Like, you're never going to be an ancient Greek poet because you're not in ancient Greece, but the ancient Greeks will live on through whatever comes out of your mouth, whatever you write down. And the more flow state you understand, the more you realize that, like, you are talking, you do have like a point of contact with the language itself. And that feels like, to me, to be the realm of poetry, as much as it is not like this ivory, like, because it seems like that's the combination of an ivory tower viewpoint or a folk pop music celebrity. I don't know, what do you think?
Well, you know, I'm thinking about a few things here. So I mean, I'm thinking about the Bard, right? And the fact that that was a form of entertainment, right? And so, okay, so let's say, well, what has replaced the Bard? Well, media, right? We used to be entertained with our ears, and now we're entertained with our eyes. And so people have difficulty listening, like paying attention here. They're even losing their attention here, I think, like, because I talked about this with somebody once. The flashes of light are getting
even like
closer
even
together.
the big the flashes of light closer together, but also video games.
Yeah.
Like that's the
So
next
you're
bit.
constantly being stimulated, right? And there's no, Monty Python. One of my favorite Monty Python scenes is this long, slow pan. Like it's like excruciatingly slow. Okay. And it's just this like barren hillside with dead grass on it. It's not even pretty. And then there's a tree. Finally, in the center, there's a tree, right? And then the narrator says, "The lodge," and then it pans away at that same excruciating. And I'm like, yes, because what they're critiquing there is the inability for people to actually wait for it, right? And when the Bard would, sing his song, which was a poem, sometimes it would be like 50 stanzas long, like, and it was the journey that everybody went on with him, and they could wait for it. They had the patience, right? We live in a culture that does not have that kind of patience anymore. And that was one of the reasons when I saw rap emerge, that I was like, oh, there's the Bard. There's the Bard again. The Bard is back, right? And now it's like, well, it's almost like a mix of the Bard and the Jester at the same time, because they're critiquing, which I think that probably the Bard did too. But you said something about, that was the last thing that you said there. I had another thought.
The meeting place language.
Yeah. Like I think that original language was song. That's what I think. I actually, when we moved, I got married when my daughter was 3. So I was a single mom, and I had a daughter. And when she was 3, we got married and moved to Switzerland from Canada. And she was suddenly immersed in this other culture, and everybody was speaking a different language. And she didn't understand them, but she desperately wanted to socialize with them. And so she would go out in our yard. We had a little fenced yard, and people would walk by, and she'd yell hello. She'd greet them in Swiss. She knew the greeting. And then they'd come over to talk to her, and then she would speak to them in their language, but it was only the song of their language, okay? She knew the music perfectly. But
my cousin did the same when he moved to Switzerland when he was 3 years old.
Really?
I asked him, because he's 18 now, and I was like, and he was apparently the first of his family to have conversational level, like Swiss German and German.
Yeah.
Like his sisters were like 3-4 years older than him, and they were struggling with it. And I asked him, it was like, because he went straight to primary school to learn.
Yeah.
I was like, what were you doing when they were like speaking a language you didn't know? He said he was just going with it. He was like he just go along with it. Like a teacher goes blah blah blah, and then the students go blah blah blah. So you blah blah in a back way, and like he wasn't conscious of what he was doing. My grandparents went over like 6 months after they moved in, and they were like, "Can you say anything in German?" He's like, mm-mm.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. But like, yeah, like there's that point of intuition like almost,
Yeah, well,
where it's like,
yeah, she would sing this, she would talk, but she had all the lilts and all the ups and downs of the language. She had it just perfect. And she could imitate that. And then people would lean in and say, what? And they would listen close. And there was no words that they recognized, right? Because she wasn't saying any real vocabulary.
Yeah.
And my husband's godfather's wife was a special ed teacher, and she said, oh man, this is so interesting to watch, because this is how language evolves. Like, you're actually seeing it in real time. It's music first, right? It's a song. And then the words kind of, I don't know, they emerge out of it. And so I think that makes poetry very ancient, because poetry is a song, right? Like it has a cadence, it has a rhyming scheme. Sometimes it has a body, it has a form of its own, right? And it has to be actually expressed in that way, otherwise it doesn't come. Like, you know, I was just going through some poetry with a friend, and I was like, oh no, you got to fix that. That stanza is like, it starts down there, and like, don't know that you could have that on the end of that sentence. It goes over here, you know, because it matters, right? Because it's a bit of a music, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's also a point of like, that's why it's oral. Like, that's why you have to speak it. And it's not just like the author has to speak it, because the author really doesn't matter. It's a perspective thing, really. When you're reading it, you embody that perspective. But you only embody that perspective if you start speaking it. Like Emily Dickinson and stuff like that. I like, one of my favorite books, same short as well, is actually called Grief is the Thing with Feathers. And it's based off of the Emily Dickinson Love is the Thing with Feathers. Poem. Oh my goodness. Like, and one of the things I noticed is the more you memorize something, the deeper you feel it.
Yes.
Until you can actually get to a point when it's so ingrained in your memory that you don't need to worry about where you are in the poem.
Yeah.
You can just be in that moment and know that you're going to go to the next one.
Yeah.
Like I was saying to you last night about seeing my grandfather quote Banjo Patterson out of the blue.
Yeah.
As if he just learnt it for school or something. It was absolutely one of the most amazing things. Yeah. And he could say it. Like, there were jokes, there's humor, there's frivolity in like Patterson's work that if you just read it, like, you've had kids go through oral assignments. Like I did a poetry like workshop in a high school once, and I was like, all right, now you read At Last Even the King Got to Hear It. Yeah. The capital that round the middle. I was like, I forget like how people think you can speak something. It's like, yes, okay, cool. You have to start with that.
Yeah.
But then the better at learning to embody that speech. Like, I think that's what poetry is for people. Like, poetry is embodied language. Like,
yes,
it's not an idea. It's not something else. It is that music in a sense, but it's that music that has a point of meaning and point of ceremony almost. Right?
Yes, it does. Yeah, it does.
And when would you get someone to say a poem?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
It's at a wedding or a funeral or a birthday, or like, it's occasions, it's moments of celebration and stuff like that. But it's
nowadays,
a point of embodying.
But people read poetry as a form of, we have, like I was thinking about that earlier when you were talking about this, and we have television to take us on that emotional roller coaster, and we love that, right? We're like, oh, we watch rom-coms because we want to cry and we want to laugh, and and horror films because we want the adrenaline rush and all that. Like, people love that, and that's what storytelling does for people. And I think that poetry gave people that opportunity too. Like, and so, you know, like I'm reading some of the Bronte sisters right now, poetry, and it's okay. It's not like world moving poetry or anything, you know, but that's how they could entertain each other too, by reading poems to each other. And, you know, if it was about a lost love or something like that, they could all go to that emotional place together. You know, they didn't have TV, right? And I'm not saying it was just a form of entertainment. Like, I'm not trying to reduce it down to that, but it is that somehow we have this desire for this communal experience that we get from storytelling, you know, the and the ooh, and the, you know, all that.
I used to for a long time there was actually like moments when I would just listen to Paul, just because I wanted that preaching tick. But I wanted that pitch of preaching. I was like, oh yes, the oration. Oh yes, here it comes. But I think you're right. I think there's like, it has that, there's a yes and kind of thing with poetry, where it's like there is like this depth of understanding and participation and ceremony and stuff like that. But it is also entertainment. It is also like something that is meant to actually be engaging. It's not just meant to be this special thing. I think there's like, when you talked about hip hop before, there's like, the bard is there. Like, it's definitely there, but it's also sweetened to a point where it can be too much.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
the oration of wealth.
Doesn't it depend on the artist, you think?
Yeah, it does. But I would suppose it also depends where the artist is from as well, because we're looking at the culture of modernity within that as well.
Yeah.
What was it called? There's a specific sect of Islam that sort of came around, like the Malcolm X sort of chapters, that hugely influenced hip hop, to the point that like the idea was like that's why you had to freestyle your rap, which I think is like one of the coolest things I could ever witness and you could imagine doing. Is like, let alone writing a poem like just off the cuff of your head, speaking it with no prompting. Like, I've done it a handful of times, and it is like, that's an interesting situation to be in. But that was how knowledge was passed on. That's how they saw the formation of language. And that's like, you had to do it in dialogue with people, and in dialogue became a battle with them. And it's kind of like turning Sophia to Nikea again.
Right. It's true. Yeah. You know, I recently watched it. Maybe you've seen it. Jonathan Pajot. He speaks to, I think it was Jonathan Pajot speaking to an Ethiopian Orthodox deacon.
Oh yeah.
Did you watch that?
Wow.
That they have a school of poetry.
Yeah.
In the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and there's a poem read every Sunday, every liturgy.
Every Sunday. Yeah.
Every liturgy. So then they have several liturgies in the week. So every liturgy, they have to compose a new poem. They only read it once,
and then
gone.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
Could you imagine? It's like, what would be worse though? What would be worse, being in the liturgy, like listening to the poem, and then knowing you'll never listen to it again, or writing the poem, knowing you'll have to get rid of it?
He said they do keep them. They do keep them.
Oh,
they keep copies of them, but they're only read and out loud once, and they're composed like that day or something. And they have to complete, I don't know how many years of this school of poetry, and it's like one of the most important steps to becoming a priest.
Yeah.
So
you start becoming a priest from like 5 or something.
Yeah, I know. Like, you are in such you're in such a metaphysical space that really the best expression for you during the liturgy is a poem, right? Like it makes sense.
Yeah.
I,
Well,
I was just like,
and they would sing it as well, presumably as well.
yeah, they chant it. And I was like, okay, let me in that church.
let me in. Yes, it's so true. I think there's like, it's so interesting, like how people have like changed service and denominations and stuff. Like I go to a Tridentine mass when I can, because I think that's like the closest I can see. And like there are Orthodox churches in Adelaide, but they're like 2.5 hours drive and stuff like that. And there are ones that are closer, but they are in Russian and Greek and stuff like that. But it's there is an interesting like point with that type of, it's like the ritual really like it needs to be there, like, and I suppose people can get used to the different rituals in Hillsong Protestant churches or traditional Catholic or Anglican, like, and I don't know if that's something that we're meant to do. We're meant to just get used to the tradition that we have around us, but it feels like it's like, okay, does that mean I have to start with like rapping? It's like, oh, I want to rap in the way that embodies this kind of wisdom. It's like, no, rap about material things and selfish nature. And I'm like, oh, do I have to?
Well, there's this guy, it was years ago, I think he's Canadian, from Mogadishu. He's an immigrant to Canada, and his name is Kanon. Have you ever heard of him?
No, I can't say I have.
Kanon, and he rapped.
Kanon.
Yeah, K-A-N-A-A-N.
Oh, I actually think I have heard of him before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the first time that I actually liked rap music, and I bought his album. Like this is in the 90s sometime. I bought it because I just thought, okay, there's something going on here. And it was, like if you just look at his lyrics, I'm trying to think of he has an album. I just remember the cover. It was a camel in a desert was the first one that he ever made. And, it was coming from like, he came out of Mogadishu when Mogadishu was in really bad shape. Okay.
Yeah.
And he was living on the streets probably, I think like, I don't know music wise if you'd like it, but the lyrics, like the words of his songs are amazing. Yeah.
Oh.
And
yeah. So don't tell me I got to be the same. I'm just trying to get you to know my name. And with respect to the rules of the game, they don't apply because I came this far. Stage dive like a rock star. Interesting.
Yeah.
And that troubadour. It's really interesting. I had there was a guy who he's a TED Talk. He founded a company called the Hip Hop Shakespeare Company.
Oh, wow.
And he used to do lectures, and he would play a game, and it would be like, hey guys, like, I'm gonna say a line and you have to tell me, is it rap or is it Shakespeare?
Oh, wow, cool.
And it was pretty hard. It was actually pretty difficult to distinguish without the full context. Like one line to one line, what actually like it means to be in hip hop. Because as much as like we can sort of like as easy as it is to judge the materiality and the modernity side of what hip hop is or what hip hop's become, there's this really big thing around it of that hip hop is just declaring your existence. because it's just saying I am.
Yeah.
I am here. I am this. I am that. Like there is a material element and sort of that type of stuff, and the misogynist element kind
Yeah.
of, because it's a bunch of very poor men who that's how they competed. They competed on materials and they competed on women. Like,
yeah.
And that's why it has the opportunity for everything else, because it doesn't matter who you are. You can still do hip hop. It matters that you write, and matters that you write your own existence. And like, that's why like it came into it was such a big thing for me to get writing, because I realized that like you write who you are. You don't write who you like expect yourself to be, or you don't write to be this person. Like, and then that's sort of how it can change, and sort of that's where it becomes a point of growth for people, I think, as well, because the greater they know themselves.
There's also something interesting about the rhyme. You know? Okay, so like a lot of poetry, kind of the rule of thumb for poetry was rhyme, right? Had to rhyme.
Yeah. And
that goes with the song, right? That goes with the music of the thing, the musicality, the quality of music. And because the rhyme acts almost like punctuation too, right? So it you know where you are in the poem, because the lines are closing each other, you know? And rap is it's a rhyming thing, right? And I mean, I've written both rhyme and non-rhyming, and I have to say that rhyming felt more natural to me, like a rhyming poem. And I don't know, you know, like I have this thing about the beauty of constraint. Like I think that constraint actually provokes even more creativity. And so if you constrain yourself through form or, you know, number of stanzas or your rhyming scheme or whatever, then you can provoke more creativity out of yourself. And I think that the rhyme actually does that. Like it provokes quite a bit of creativity. And I find it really interesting that rappers rhyme, because the modern world doesn't rhyme anymore. Like most of the poetry is not rhyming.
No,
right?
It's intentionally, like Tom Shippey, like it's just like, like a feature of poetry is apparently that it has to be difficult.
Yeah.
It's just like, why, like, it has to be this imperceptible thing. Like, even though, like, I find it natural to rhyme, but twice, and then it has to be a different rhyme. I think that might be a point of ADD with me more than sort of my response to tradition and stuff like that. But like, I think there's always like, I always get lost in the scales of it, because there's rhyming at the end of the line, and then there's rhyming within the words, and then there's alliteration, and then there's like pairings. I think one of the words they use.
In hip hop, you mean?
Yeah, like in hip hop and in like a lot of poetry, because there's like, I'm not sure if you ever see those videos of hip hop rhyming. They highlight the words that rhyme with each other, and then you can see it's like multicolored. Like this line ends, there's an internal rhyme in that structure, and then there's a syncopated rhyme and that type of stuff. I always find it's like rhyming is like, it's that drum. It's an old one, but Peugeot with Samuel Andreev, the musician, talked about how music was meant for two things originally. One was the ecstatic experience, like the place where you could dance and jump and move. And the other was religious ceremony to memorize. And rhyming rhyming was that help, was the memorization ability, was the tool for memorization.
Yeah.
Because yeah, it's your association, because what they're closing each other, like it is an ability to connect word to word, not just through the sentence, but actually through the words themselves.
Right.
Like they actually have an association in themselves. The structure I think is really important. I think there's something interesting about the structure being the utility. I looked at, like, if you look at Celtic poetry, or even some English poetry as well, you have a different form depending on what you want to write about.
Right.
So, and normally that means occasion. So if there's a death, this is how you write it. If there's a ceremony, this is how you write it. Or if you want to talk about a significant historical moment, it's in music, there's the same.
That's what I was going to say. It's like music, right? You've got like the funeral, and you've got the,
But yeah, like the structure, so the structure has that mode where you start to, like, it starts to dictate what the poem is for.
Right.
But then you actually still have to write the poem.
Yeah.
You still have to have the crazy liturgy into it.
Have you got a rhyming poem?
I think I can look for one somewhere. There's majority of mine are very interesting. There's this one that I tried writing, and the ones that rhyme are longer, because like I said, it's like those it's those moments that help me get past to the next idea. But I have this weird one that I'll stop within it.
Okay.
I tried writing. This is meant to be a story about, like, a fantasy version of the internet.
Okay.
Was once, never, will always not be, shall shape forever, service to the free. Hear the prayer that I echo. Father, thou art control me, surrendered the will to your hands. Let not my service become thy serpent venom. I am not your heroine. Forever to fuel, forever to guide you. Are by my side, and forever we walk on. Take my eyes, take my disguise, take me for the making of the greater world. And that's how I rhyme.
Okay.
So it's trying to, it tries to actually capture other points. I do have another one. I think it was called Water. Oh, if this one is, there's this one that I wrote. I put it up in the Discord, actually. I tried to write it as a commentary or as a description of the Peterson Viveki.
Okay. Where did you post it? In the Discord?
I put it in the Discord, in like the producing, in the I don't know, shout outs. Yeah, I only very vaguely understand Discord.
Yeah.
Yeah, this one's short enough for me to. I'll just say the whole thing.
Yeah, sure.
Well, I'll say the coolest thing about the thing that I'm most proud of is the title. So I'll quickly describe what it is. It's Yarda Srala, which is Yarda means what comes down, and it's the etymology of Jordan.
Okay.
Because that's the origin of the world, and Allah is offering, what we actually offer, and it also means gift from God, which is John.
Yeah.
And Sra is the contention. So it's that which flows down contending with that which flows up.
Oh, wow.
And it's also somehow Jordan and John.
Right.
The same thing.
Oh, that's
which I
really
love. I think that's so
Yeah.
cool. But, the temenos is kicked up with dust at dusk, and the motes reflect the red sky as it touches the dirt. A golden hour, a rising light, earth burst, a heavy sky leaning, turning world first, gripping the legs of the temple to wrestle with its reflection in attention, a narrative worth fighting for. The sky is grappling with the dirt, a schizophrenic storm that catches the tracking. Watch the dust in the wind. As a fire ignites itself in the ground, watch the impressions of the restless feet. It is not what is pressed, nor what is conceded, but how the dance gives itself into the dirt and the earth grips the toes for the throw. Before the body hits itself, it vanishes like smoke. Like the opposite of a thought, it is no longer just there. Close your nose and hide your eyes in the vast white. Only feel around and then hear a sound of a beast and a brother and another and an echo. Music becomes a threshold, holding us back from confounding, allowing us to give our calls to another, to hear one's need in their other. Wisdom is the beast that we track, satiated in our steps. When you hunt, every thought is a prayer. When you stalk, every step is careless. Open your eyes, open thrice. Open, open, open. She looks at me as if she's always been watching, always watching me. And I have seen her my whole life, seen her whole. That's love. Stumble and slip into murky water, a gurgle and gasp at the flash, a swirl and a slap before splash. Water changes, faller changes. Forevermore the hunt goes on, wet and dry, dusk and dawn. It takes the whole world on, like a beast of burden slouching towards an impossible city. In between the fire, flames and the rain, the footprints are made as the gift meets the offering.
Wow. Yeah, when I listen to your poetry, I feel like I'm on a ride.
Yeah,
It's true.
it's
It's so good, Charlie. Like it's
Thank
so
you.
good. It's so good.
It's
Just
like,
blows me away.
so like the rhyming to me is like, in that especially, is to make it easier to break away from images. Because you start focusing on the music.
Yeah.
Like I love like this small line. Feel around, then hear a sound of a beast and a brother and another and an echo. Music becomes a threshold. And like that's where the rhymes help me, because it's when you don't need to focus, when like it's like the sleight of hand.
Yeah.
Like you don't need to pay attention to your pocket when your shoulder's getting tapped. So
Right.
take it to the next one.
It's true, yeah. And it also often, without even really much consideration by the poet, it often has a shape, I find. Like it'll float you along, let's say, or it'll spiral you down, or it'll spiral you up, you know, those kinds of rhymes.
Yeah, that's one of those that's one of the reasons why I always find it hard to frame, like, or hard to structure with like a rigid one, because like there's like when I see an idea, I'm just like, I want to, like, it wants to be presented, so you have to frame it differently to everything else. But then you need to sort of somehow make them connected to each other as well.
Exactly.
I want to see if I can find, like, have you read Chesterton at all?
No, I haven't read. I have Orthodoxy, but I've never read it.
There's too many books in this.
There's 2 books.
There already is too many podcasts.
You're actually sitting you're actually sitting on 3 books, and you're being supported by 8 books. But actually, I've read a number of these, so it's all good.
Yeah, I know. I'm like resetting up my library, which is that little pocket over there.
Yeah.
And sort of like, oh yeah, I should read that one actually.
Yeah.
But I'll read you a little bit of this. It's just a dedication of Ballad of the White Horse, which is his big one.
Okay. It's a poem. It's a poem.
Yeah.
Ballad of the White
Horse. I'll just read 3 stanzas.
Okay.
Because he rhymes very specifically, but in a way that was also still very freeing.
Okay.
Of great limbs gone to chaos, and a great face turned to night. Why bend above a shapeless shroud, seeking in such archaic clouds sight of strong lords and light? Where 7 sunken Englands lie buried one by one. Why should one idle spade, I wonder, shake up the dust of fanes like thunder to smoke and choke the sun? The cloud of clay so cast to heaven, what shape shall man discern? These lords may light the mystery of mastery or victory, and these ride high in history, but these shall not return. There's a lot of structure in that.
There's a lot of structure, and it just gives it, that last line, so much weight, doesn't it? Yeah.
It carries on a beautiful pace as well. But as well, I think that's like, it's easier then to carry on your images, like 7 sunken Englands, shake up dust of fanes like thunder, smoke and choke the sun, like cloud of clay so cast, like all these, there's so many ideas that are just like in different elements.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I was like wondering if we were like going to do this. It's just like, it's very hard to know when explaining what is happening in a poem is going too far.
Yeah. Well, you know,
like
I have one I want to talk about, because it was kind of like it was kind of like a moment for me. So, and unfortunately I don't have a printed copy of it, so I'm going to have to go to it on my iPad, and then it'll just say Shari's.
It'll look like you're memorizing it.
It'll say Shari's iPad, but you'll still be able to hear my voice. But I just wanted to say about it first, because so last April, well, it was last Easter. It was Easter Sunday. My husband collapsed. His heart valve shut, and I revived him, right? And the whole thing for me was just like traumatic, because he died, and then I revived him, and then he was alive. And I felt like I was in this like space between the Shari that is and the Shari that could have been, you know, the woman who's still married and the one who could have been widowed. And I kept doing that, right? And he was in the hospital in our town for about 7 days, and then he was shipped to a bigger hospital for the surgery. And I was here by myself, and I spent a lot of time just thinking about everything, processing it, because that's just how I am. And I had started taking old poetry and editing it. And I had this one poem that I had shared with a friend. He's an editor. And so he made some corrections and some suggestions and gave it back to me. And I was just like aghast, because I wrote this poem years and years and years ago, and it just seemed perfect to me. And it wasn't like I was offended, because I asked for his help. I really, I said, don't be nice to me, just, And I thought, yeah, he's right. It needs a lot of work, right? So I would, every now and then, and I said to him, I'll edit it and I'll get it back to you. And every now and then I'd pick it up and I'd sit down at my desk and I'd look at it, and I couldn't do anything with it. And it just wouldn't let me, And I was frustrated, really frustrated. And And I couldn't figure out if it was me being prideful, if it was me being nostalgic, if it was me, like, what was hindering me, right, from doing this poem. So it's about day 5 after my husband collapses, and I'm laying on the couch and I'm thinking, I gotta do something else. And so I was thinking, well, maybe I'll edit that poem. And right away, no, don't touch it. Right. And I'm like, oh, here we go again. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to find out what this is. So I asked it, what are you? Right. And then I wrote this poem. Okay. So the poem is about me trying to figure out why I can't edit a poem. All right.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. So
Oh,
I got to find it here.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's called There You Lie. There you lie on pure white linen, dashes and dots, disjointed, groping, lacking, held together. You are old, yet not old. You haven't even been born. Have you no substance? Should I give it to you? I shall not, for you appeared to me like this. I cannot take from you. I cannot add to you. I don't know who you want to be. No, I shall leave you alone, for you will be to me a moment, a whisper, a memory. You will jar me and console and terrify me. You will weigh down on me, make me wring my hands in anger. I will hate you, and you will love me on pure white linen, and I will stumble. I can't hear you.
That's an adventure. That's an adventure for sure. That's,
right?
Oh man, yeah, it's like the other side of fear. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah, so I wrote that, and then I was like, I read it over, and I was like, this is just what happened to my husband too.
Yeah.
Because he was laying on the ground, disjointed, groping, lacking, right? Yet held together. And he was laying in the snow. Right?
Oh, wow.
Pure white linen.
And pure white linen.
Right. And anyway, it blew me away because I was like, oh wow, like you can't get away from your own existence, right? Like you just can't. Like the thing that terrified me about the poem terrified me about but the same thing terrified me in both instances, right? Of wringing my hands in anger, and I can't add to you, and I can't take. I was helpless, right? I'm helpless, right? Anyway, I just thought that was really interesting. That was something that was really jarring to me in the moment, like, because I thought, okay, good, I'm gonna try to pick this thing up and look at it from all sides and figure it out, and then it turned out to be a
red hot
of both things.
It's especially, and like to have that polarity of like, I will hate you, you will love me, like just holding that there is just like, how can you be in that position? You're just like, well, why me, and then you're like, well, of course it has to be me, I'm the perfect person in that position. It's just like, and then it's like, oh god. But I think there's something really interesting as well, where it has to be that order as well. Like it starts with a curiosity,
right?
And then it goes into the images and sort of like, I don't know, like very like disarming images, and it's like it's just unfolding, and bit by bit it just goes into that raw emotion, and then it comes out the other side
I
being,
know.
I know it's like a weird way to say it's positive and stuff like that, but I think there's something always interesting in that. Like one of the things I realize I do with my poetry is it can get very depressing.
Oh, for
And
sure.
yeah, and I think in one of the when I write depressing poetry, aside from like maybe once or twice, I always try to give myself hope at the
Yes,
same time,
same here.
because like I don't like, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, you know, we all have it, we all can get really bad, but it's so hard to, it gets much harder to go into that darkness without the light.
Hmm.
And like it's also much, it makes that hope, so much more revelatory. Like
Yes,
it's important. Like
it is important.
um it's interesting. Like one of my favorite poems I've written is a long one. I want to upload this one as well, but it's based on parkour, which I used to do when I was 17 to 20.
Yeah.
And I talked about this with Rafe Kelly, actually. I really wish we recorded it, but I talked about it because parkour has this understanding of faith
Yeah,
that is like it's the best articulation of faith that I've ever experienced.
I can see
That
that.
isn't personal. Like
Yeah.
it's, if you were to try to teach it, like I mean, I remember listening to Bishop Barron, and he said faith was an act of the revealing God or something like this, or like acting in the revealing God. And I was like, oh, that sounds cool, but I don't, I don't, I don't see that.
No.
And you know, the common belief of faith is that it's acting without knowledge,
Yes.
or like, and or like yeah, or like acting out it, but that's too close
Well,
to
it's
ignorance.
like, I would say it's more like acting without foreknowledge. Would you?
That's I kind of put it in the Luke, like panentheism way, or the Petersonian way, is like it's acting.
Yeah. Okay.
Like I used to, because I was like, it was one of these things where it was like when you do a jump like that has a very large drop, and
Yeah.
you have to try to like make this landing, and there's injury and panic and failure just very, very loudly there, and you have to like land on your toes as well. It's just like very specific
Yeah.
point, and you can't give yourself up. And what you end up doing is you count your steps, you memorize every motion, and you fully embody yourself into this action that you want to perform. And you do have to start realizing that what you're doing is more important than what you might see or what might like otherwise happen. You have to travel ahead, and you have to start seeing what you're doing, like that path that you're taking,
Okay.
more than anything else. And you have to see it as real. And
Yeah.
one of the things that I would took as like, whenever I would jump, I'd always like have a question just as I was leaving. I was like, why are you doing this, buddy? And but it would be like, but that question is always going to be a part of it. But the whole point of the faith thing is you're doing it. You're like, that's the why. The why is you're doing it. And that's the faith in my mind. The faith is,
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
the faith is just doing it. It's just belief. I said, like, and that doesn't mean you won't fall.
Right. No,
And
there's no
that's the
guarantee for
important.
yeah.
Yeah, there's no guarantee. Like, to me, like, it's like faith is not based on a reward.
So then would you say that it's just a forward motion?
Yeah, yeah. It's like I like without, as I said, like without like faith, it's not that you will make the jump, but without faith, you won't.
Right.
You won't jump.
So with faith, that faith doesn't guarantee that you'll make it, as in be successful.
Yeah, that you may be successful, get your outcome, get what you like.
Yeah. But without
Think
faith,
is in the other way.
Without faith, you won't even jump.
Yeah.
You know what's interesting is I've been thinking about stasis as a form of, like, as the demonic. I've had some experiences, and it seems to me that what the demonic wants to do is just have you do nothing. Okay, more than anything, because any kind of motion is actually forward motion, even if you think you're going backwards, right? Can't hear you.
Creation is its own form of destruction. Like,
Right,
it's just
right.
to think something, you have to unthink another idea. It's the entire concept that you can just make something without letting go of other things, or let go of other things without making something. It's like, it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist. That's right. But what does exist is stasis, like the nothing, right? It's the no motion at all. And it seems to me that would be the thing.
Faithless.
Well, yeah, that's faithless. Yes. Oh my God, that's so good.
Yeah.
I like how you got there.
Yeah. Faithless is just not moving. It's like,
not moving.
Don't do it. Like even like when people are depressed, they go like, why do it? Why do it? Like, it's always that question without the answer. And you realize that the question is almost irrelevant, because it's just like, you're not doing it. So like, that's it.
Yeah. And, you know, Rilke says, and I post this all the time, but, you know, he says the point is to live everything. He also says in that same excerpt, he says, don't worry about the questions, because just forget about the questions and live into the answers. Yeah. Which is what you described. Because you have this question, right? And then your jump is the living into the answer. It's the living into the answer. You can't
think about the question.
No, you can't. Like, you have to live into
you can think about the question. You can think about it. You can, and that can help you. But
but you can't expect to know the answer to it. Because the actual, like you said, the embodied movement is in a sense the answer to the question. And that's what Rilke says. He says you have to live into the answer, which is what, to me, you're describing.
There's I wrote a Substack piece actually called the devil that is of stasis.
Oh, you did? Yeah. And you know what? That link didn't work. So.
Oh no, I'll pop another one up. But it's so true, because I think that there's like we think forward motion and backward motion. We very rarely think stay still. And I think a lot of people actually think that like, what is the? I'll see if I can find it really quickly, because people think that you can like make a contract with demonic forces, because they think all a demonic force is a counteracting force against God or against that which is holy. But that's not that's not the contract that they're after. They're not contra movement is still movement.
Exactly. No, what their contract is, don't move.
Yeah. Like, and the interesting thing that like comes in with stasis is, I wrote a little bit of poems inside it, and one of the things was, pick up the earth, shovel the path, the map makes the road, the journey made the map was useless, the guide didn't see the flood, look up.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's just like, you can think that the world is just going to stay the same, and you can think that's very useful, but it's unless you actually acknowledge reality as something that is actually going to create, that is going to grow and change and manifest and unmanifest and embody and disembody, like it's not proper reality. I think like I really wish there was a better word for it, but stasis, like the best understanding I have of stasis is this idiotic idea of just. Like, it's just this. It's just that. Oh, it's just a biscuit. Oh, it's just a thing. It's
just a tree.
Well, like, I mean, like, I used to be a smoker, and I was like, it's just a cigarette.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I went years trying to get rid of that just one cigarette. And it's just like, unless you acknowledge it as a pattern, and like that's one of the main things I like, that's the reason I still quit. The reason was like, oh, you can have one. I was like, one is a million.
Yes.
Like one is going to lead to two.
Yeah.
And that's
never
what's been
just.
hard.
Yeah, it's
never just.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of like problems when it comes down to like how people try to, I don't know, fix problems in their life. Like, I'm starting to become a personal trainer, and one of the things I see is so easy for people to do is saying they just need to lose weight.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, there's no such thing. Like,
yeah.
Like the cool, like I find it very strange that I'm only noticing it now, but like it's called fitness. Like, it's about the life that you fit.
Right.
It's like it's about the fittedness of what you do, and how you embody that is how you fit.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, I just need to do this. And like, you probably need to change your entire life.
Yeah. Well, see, this is what people want. They want the one answer, right?
Yeah.
That solves all the problems. That's the fountain of youth. That's the holy grail. That's the, you know,
the magic pill.
It's the one thing, you know, the one magic thing, and it's never just like that. I use the word just, but I said
it's never
just one thing, right? It's just not. So yeah.
And like, if you think it is, that's like, then you're not seeing it.
You know what was interesting for me, like what I learned about stasis in personal experience was, like, I had these encounters with the demonic, and they're usually in my dreams. And I would say to them, what do you want? Why are you tormenting me? And they would say, we want you to stop. And I'd say, stop what? Stop. And I'd say, stop. You mean stop moving on my spiritual path? That's it. Stop. And it was like, I could do everything else. Like, I could consume, I could, you know, live in this one-dimensional materialistic world. I could do all that. I could act, but my spiritual life, the void, right, could never be filled.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And that journey could never be taken. And of course, that makes you a dead person, right? You're just you're literally a zombie.
Like, yeah.
What you
it's
are.
Like, it's even worse than dead, because like something dead is food for something else.
Yeah, yeah. You're the living dead. And
Yeah, the living dead, where you can't be eaten and you can't eat, and you're
yeah,
eternally satiated. You're eternally trying to catch your desire. It's yeah, it's so interesting, like how it goes, because like, and I think that's the reason why poetry isn't popular anymore, because you can't just read poetry.
yeah,
Like poetry isn't, I don't know, deserving of its name if you just read it. Like it's the reason why it's like the frame in movies, or it's on like placards and stuff like that. It's like, here, read it, say it,
yeah,
become it, just for
yeah,
that moment. Like that's why you like these thoughts that we have, like we have to go through them. They're not stories in the sense of they're not explaining what's happening,
no,
but they are stories in the sense of you understand something that you had before. Like you like a narrative is like, you have this, it breaks, there's a lot of chaos, and then it comes back again,
yeah,
and there's that cyclical appearance and that cyclical understanding. Poetry is almost like, it feels like it's that first person perspective of that. Like it's that experience of meeting, of
yeah,
enchanting,
yeah,
of losing, of chaos, and of reconciliation.
yeah,
It is not that. It is just, but it is how that feels. It is how it comes out. Like,
yeah,
especially when it's like thoughts that we struggle with, and like ideas that we don't understand.
yeah,
Like, I always feel like they never, like, it, a poem will never fix a problem, but it will show you the problem and the solution together. You
yeah,
won't be able to solve it by doing that, because you still have to do it yourself. Like, you still have to embody that solution, and you still have to carry it through. But
that's the jump.
that's the jump. You need
Yeah,
you need to come through it. And I think
yeah,
there's something really, that's the reason why we have such a faithless society, because we
yes.
don't, like, the most that we participate in is memes. That's it.
My dad,
and,
my father's 80. And I said to him,
yeah.
oh, Dad, I want to show you a meme. He goes, what's a meme? And I said, it's a joke.
It's a
That's
joke.
what it is. It's a joke. It's just a joke. Like, once upon a time you'd say, a Catholic and an Anglican and a Jew went into a bar, right? And now it's
Yeah.
a meme, but it's the same.
Yeah, that's it. It's like, I saw this picture of a dude, and it's like this, and he said, so you're still coming to work, right? I'm like, God damn. It's so funny. And, well, that's the thing, is like, a meme is, to me, a joke is laughing at something that we all care about.
Yeah, well, that's everything in humor. To me, that's what makes everything funny. Is, like I lived in Switzerland, right? And when I first went to Switzerland, I think that's the hardest thing to learn in a foreign culture. It's the humor, because you don't care about what that culture cares about. Okay?
Yeah, definitely.
So when they tell a joke, you're like, I don't get it. What's so funny about that? Well, it's because, if it shouldn't really be like that, it should be like this, like, because we care about it, and this is how we do it,
Yeah.
And that's what it is. That's what makes things funny, I think.
The fact that you care about it. Yeah. No, that's really true.
Yeah.
I think, like, that is like it was like a rough illustration, but I remember Stephen Fry said the difference between American humor and English humor is American humor is laughing at something from a perfect perspective, and English humor is laughing at yourself from an imperfect perspective.
Right.
Because there's this, and like I think, and that's a gross exaggeration in some ways, I think, but I think there's like, it speaks to like a very big truth between America and England that I've heard a lot, and that's like, you can be the top of the pecking order in America. You can't be the queen though in England though. Like, you're always going to be under. You're always going to be under. So you might as well laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas like, you know, you could be the top in America, and you could be that thing going down and like just picking things up and laughing at them.
Yeah.
And I think Australia is bizarre in our culture.
I bet.
Because we're slowly becoming more American in some ways, but we stay European in some ways. And then on top of that, we're not European anymore, we're British. And we have our own mixing pot culture. And I think there's something about the place itself that we embody, which is like this very relaxed intensity that you can't quite, like, I can't quite explain. I can't like quite understand. It's like
relaxed
this weird
intensity. You know what that conjures up? A hot summer day on the beach.
That's it. That's Australia. It's right there. It's like
getting burnt to a crisp.
Yeah, just getting absolutely scorched and just going like, yep, this is our day. Like, we have like the worst building codes ever. Like nothing is like actually designed to sort of keep heat in. Like we've never really built us, like our buildings are old English architecture. Like they're not really designed for intense cold. They're not really designed for intense heat. And so they're just kind of always there, and we kind of have to just blast a lot of air conditioning to make it work, or we just live with it. And I think that's what we do. It's like, yeah, okay, it's like 50 degrees outside, that's Celsius, which I don't know is like 150 something. I can't.
Wow.
And it's just like, yeah, all right, let's carry on then.
That sounds very, you know, though, that actually sounds very Irish, Scottish, you know, let's just Canadian, like, let's just carry on. Like, yeah, like we had minus 35, 36 actually, Celsius. And then in the summer, last year, we had plus 45.
Yes, that's what it's like in the summer in Australia.
Yeah, I mean that was really like I've never had that before. But
you
still,
never would have
like,
had that, yeah.
Plus, it'll get plus 32, 36 easily.
Yeah.
And you think about those extremes, and everybody's just like, oh well, did you plug in your car?
It's just like you can complain about it. Like the thing is, like, you end up like I very strange tangent we've got on. I feel like everyone always ends up like you complain about the change for the week. Like in Australia, even like when it goes into winter, like you start complaining about the cold, even though it's not cold.
Yeah.
Like if it's been 36 for a month straight, and then all of a sudden it's just like 19. It's just like, oh, it's freezing, and it's just like, that's warm in England. It's warm for most places. Like I don't know my Fahrenheits anymore because I haven't really needed to use them. I remember that 36, like minus 40 is the same in Celsius.
Well,
we
are Celsius. We are Celsius in Canada.
Nice.
Yeah.
Because it makes sense.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
But I think I've been very interested to see like how like modernity is that idea of stasis, like for sure. Like I saw in in Sapiens, the book, they talk about how that's what the problem was with our agricultural system. Like we started planting grain because we thought I just need enough grain and then I'll be sorted. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, but I have all of these resources and then I'll be fine.
Yeah.
And then the pattern comes and you have more children and you need to feed those children more, and so you need to make more land and more tilling and more agriculture, and you just get yourself caught.
Yeah.
You get yourself caught even though it's a stasis.
Yeah.
Because there's no
It's a hamster wheel kind of thing.
Yeah. It's a strange point. Yeah, you're running around in this kind of circle, and like we see modernity in like all of these cultures like come through, but it is right. It's like I do feel like it is collapsing. Like this idea of, oh, it's just this, oh, it's just that, like, because
I actually think COVID has changed that for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's a couple of things going on there. First of all, with all the lockdowns, people stayed home with their families and realized how much they really missed that, like how much it really meant to be at home, right? And then the other thing is that suddenly you don't have the freedom. The illusion of freedom becomes a reality, right? That's what it is. Like, so, and like this is something my husband and I, we realized when we were living in Switzerland. We were watching the war in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and we saw the siege of Sarajevo. And I remember saying to him, geez, this could happen to us. Like, because it was happening right now. Like, this wasn't 1942. I was watching it on the news, right? And there's people in Sarajevo, they've got no power, no water, no groceries. It's winter. They're burning their furniture. They're being shot and sniped from rooftops. They're lining up in bread lines and they can't get out. And I thought, well, of course, because they're trapped, because they're completely and utterly dependent on the system. And if the system fails, then it's gone. They're lost.
It's gone.
And
like,
so
it's not.
In reality, they're living in an illusion, in a false sense of security, right?
It's one of the hardest things I've like tried to explain to people, and if someone won't see it themselves, then you can't see it. Like,
no.
Going back to George MacDonald and the shadow, like to think that it can't happen here. Yeah. It's an impossible thought now. And I think that's like the illusion that is true. The illusion that like, oh yeah, like all of this will end in fine because, we've had the last 80 years of everything going well. And, that only happens in foreign countries. It's just like, you are a foreign country to someone else.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people in Vancouver, for example, they buy an apartment downtown because they don't want the view. And they realize that they can't live in their apartment 24/7. They need to get out, go to the mountains, go hiking, go skiing, and they do that for recreation. Now, when you take all that away because of lockdowns, suddenly they're in their luxury all the time, right? And and it's not such a luxury. It becomes a prison. And in the area that we live in, we've seen a lot of people moving here from the Lower Mainland, like from the more populated areas, because they couldn't get out of their house. They weren't allowed outside. And if they moved here, my husband and I go outside all the time and whenever we want. We have no neighbors.
Yeah, what lockdown like?
I met families on our road, which is like a dirt road. It's 17 kilometers and it's, dirt. And I saw during the first lockdowns when everything was like kids couldn't go in the parks and all that stuff. There was a family just riding their bicycles on our road, hiding. They were hiding from the authorities because our road is so off the beaten track, and I thought, oh my God, these poor people, like they have to hide to get outside. Oh, anyway, we're really
No,
off
yeah.
track.
Yeah. Like, I mean, the main thing with COVID is and the stasis is it's just 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And like, that's where it comes back to. Like, I think like the reason like stasis is this really big problem is because it's it's unembodied. Like it can't participate in anything. Like even
Right.
if it was true, like, oh, it's just this. Like even if it was true, it doesn't need anything else then. Nothing else is important.
Yeah, that's why
Like,
it feels like a zombie,
yeah,
right?
because it doesn't matter. It doesn't need anything else. It can't. It doesn't need a relationship. It doesn't need,
Yeah.
a good meaning or anything like that. Like it's like it feels like a lot of stuff that like we've made in the current year is just like stuff that we'll do. Like,
Yeah.
well, it'll just be this and it'll just be fine. And I'm like, that's not what we are. Like
No.
it's like to our core being. Like we are like interconnected things.
Yeah.
We are like relational beings that actually like we can only live in growth and chaos. We can't live in another point of reality. Like it's the fitness again. It's like we are who we are because of
Yeah.
what we do and how we do it.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah. Totally.
I mean, and I do wonder like how much technology is too much technology, or like is technology like the end? Is technology making us more this way? Because I think for a large part it really is, quite unconsciously so.
I
But
think, yeah, it has that effect. I see it in children, especially, unfortunately.
yeah,
But
I see
on the
that
other
like
hand, go ahead.
yeah. On the other hand, like there's Luke and I were talking about this, and it seems as though this is the collapse point because the whole idea of the Reformation couldn't have happened without the Gutenberg press,
Mm-hmm.
because you had to survive, you had to have this idea survive
It did disseminate.
on
Yeah.
it had to survive on an object, because the idea was like Christianity was surviving in the church because people were passing it on, and that was the format. But if you
Yeah.
wanted to break that format, you needed to break how that idea carries on.
Yeah.
And we've basically made information more and more accessible to the point that now the internet, I see we can live in our own narrative completely.
Yeah.
Like I find it very strange, like with like the rando things, like because it's almost like we've all watched the same videos. We've all seen
Yeah.
the same podcasts. Like we know what our reality is. Like just not knowing if that's actually true.
Right. Right.
It's just like, I mean, I
Yeah.
watch Michael Sartori. Who else does? I don't like. It's but the thing about that is that too is a pattern. Like an individual's narrative has a convalescent point. Like it has its own half-life. The
Yes.
narrative can only last as long as the narrative is true.
Yeah.
In my mind, and that's where re-enchantment comes back, because we meet all of these worlds, we meet all of these narratives, and eventually they all have to come to the truth, otherwise
Yeah.
they'll fall apart. Like even video games like has a problem. Like I actually think it's kind of funny. I think most video games that are coming out now are worse than what we've had before. Like I think this is the first time I've seen current video games degrade, because
Okay.
they're realizing they've reached the end. They've reached the end of participation.
Well, that's what movies are like too, don't you think? Movies are this, like it's like my husband and I watched the most recent Jurassic Park. It's older,
Oh,
but we watched it on TV the other night. And I said to him, that's the same damn story, you know, as the first one. I mean, even the girl has red hair. Like, what the hell? Couldn't they made her blonde? You know?
Yeah, like just like one thing different, maybe.
Just one.
But like, yeah, and it's true. Like for it to survive, for those things to survive, they have to. I was watching. I can't remember who Paul had on, but they were talking about the Western, and there's what they were saying. Like within the Western, there's this trope at the very end where the sheriff, rides off into the sunset with the Bonnie Lass, like, and that's the object of new creation and new things. And these stories, they can't exist anymore in that way because they can't. You have to stay in the story.
Right.
You have to go back to the beginning. Like all of these Marvel movies, like they are like they're not part of that pattern. Like you talked about it with Superman. Like Superman is an alien. Like he is not part of this world.
Right.
And I feel like there's the reason that like there's a reason Marvel movies are so big is because of the sheer size of them. But they're the ones that are trying to keep the dead story alive by injecting it with new living stories.
Yeah.
Once it like that's why like Iron Man and Captain America and Thor make this pattern. But then after Endgame, it's like the pattern is gonna die because it's time.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, no, it's coming back alive because Spider-Man and Doctor Strange and Shang-Chi and this and Eternals and blah. And it's just trying, like it's just adding more and more things to keep it alive because it doesn't want to die.
I also wonder though how much of capitalism plays into this because you know,
like I mean,
they
it's
just want to
preservation.
make money. It's like, you know, like seriously, I'm old enough to remember when everything new promised more prosperity and better lives and you know, like you're going to have all this leisure time, you're going to be able to do the things you really enjoy. And now we have all this great material. We got plastic. We can make things to build them to last, right?
Forever and ever on it.
And everything just keeps getting like we get more and more anxious. We have less and less time. All the quality of our goods becomes worse and worse. Nothing lasts. Nothing's built to last. It's actually built not to last. And the whole thing just is like moving towards entropy, you know. and you had this promise of prosperity and leisure. And you know, when I hear people talking about universal basic income, they tell the same story. They tell
like,
that story, and I'm just like, you got to be out of your mind to think that's going to make people happy. Yeah,
you gotta like, it makes no sense. I think it's interesting because it's like, capitalism has a play in it, but it's like it's modernity even more so because you can have an enriching life from material things. The problem is people have now specialized their lives so much that they think that prosperity is only in one thing.
Yeah.
And that's where it is. Like it's like we need to make more. We need to make more of this. More of this thing will give me prosperity. And it's like, no, it won't. That's not what prosperity means. Like it's the same as like someone trying to lose weight by just starving themselves.
Yeah. Not doing the light.
It's just like they'll die and cause irreparable damage, and they'll gain the weight back immediately.
Yeah.
And it's like it is one of those things where it's just like you can't participate in the stories that they give. They need you to like you can only get so much out of it, and so they try to just artificially increase it. Like, there's the reason, like the reason Star Wars is, I was talking about this last night with my partner, is like, she says, like, Star Wars is so big because you're allowed to participate in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're actually like it is the most fictionalized fandom ever. People have written stories again and again and again and again about that thing.
Yeah.
It's such an important thing. Like, but like the ability to participate in the story itself is the reason that it's like, it's so important. And
do you remember, you probably don't remember Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah.
That was the very first show that people could participate in.
Yeah.
You know,
I can play it.
Yeah, they would line up for the movie and dressed as all the characters, and then go in and dance and sing, and actually, I never went. I never went to a Rocky Horror Picture Show. But yeah, I don't know if it's still a thing or not, but I remember it was for a long, long time. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's this, like, that's like the thing is like, the more embodiment and the more participation, the longer it will last, the less it has a chance of dying. But like, you have to start keeping it alive artificially if you want it to carry on. Otherwise, like, it has to transform. It has to be completely different. Like, I'm still waiting for like the new Star Wars or the new Avatar, even like the new story that actually offers something into the imagination that actually we can use. But I have a feeling it's gonna be the Bible.
I don't
know if it's gonna be God's dog or not, but
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit on the pessimistic side when it comes to that, but
with good reason.
I'm wondering if I should probably go here soon. So But I'd love to do this again.
Definitely.
Charlie. And I'm just wondering if we want to each close out with a poem.
Yeah, that'd be a great idea.
Yeah.
I have to pick one. Yeah. Oh wow. This one's pretty apt. You want to go first?
Okay, I'll just I've read this on the podcast with Nate because I wrote some. I printed these off, but I'll read this one anyways. Okay, this one's called Morning Prayer. Oh no, I didn't want to read that one. Waking up early. That's what this one is. I like this one. My cat wonders, why so early? Quick belly scratch, I heave the duvet off my warm body. Cold air over my limbs, lifting me. The ritual begins. I think I'll find God in these early morning hours. I think he will join me as I shake off the weariness of the night. And I do. A puppy stares through the window, wondering. I wanted to see what she does while she waits. I wanted to be first. The sun woke her. I think they know him. They who rise with the warm rays and sleep with the silver of starlight. They who breathe in and out without a worry, unburdened. I see it in their eyes. They have no questions. They breathe in and out. I think if I rise early, he will speak to me. I think if I rise early, I will see the stillness of a house broken by revelation. I think if I rise early, there will be something waiting for me.
Wow. Oh, great. That's incredible. This is a very good way to show it. Thanks for this. I'm really glad that we actually get to bring poetry into these things. I love like all the discussions that you guys have and that we have. But it's nice to sort of show stuff. I call on every randos person to start writing poetry more.
Yes, please.
And
Yeah,
bring it
sharing it.
bring it into your discussions, because
yeah,
this is a huge part of what we're trying to do. I feel like this is a huge part to bring attention, participation, like care into this world, like through language.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this one is called The Colors of Sunrise. I sat at the breaching point where all the ships and carriers slowly groaned upon the backs of oceans, gently sighing themselves upon land, setting forth their horizon in a brazen morning. I sat at the threshold of the night before, awake, unthinking, as the world somnambulated the horizon, turquoise turning out from cobalt as fuchsia streaks orate clouds. The first god to be named slowly explains why he was. The first bird song runs up the back of ocean wind, the opposite of a lullaby. Unrest soothes me. No matter how grand a ship may be made, it is always the water that lets them pass, as darkness ushers day, as father welcomes son. A sunrise that stretches time, where one light beckons the seconds to stay, drifting atop our shadows, oceans before roads, before dreams hide by waking. Come the horns of angels, the violet parade, singing not of ending, nor beginning, but becoming. Yay!
I love that.
All right. That was great, Shari. I am going to stop recording now. Thanks, guys.